Imagine your HOA threatening your kids over sidewalk chalk. Yeah, this story is insane. Stick around because the dad in this one didn't just clap back. He completely destroyed the entire HOA board. And if you love real-life HOA revenge stories, hit that subscribe button and let's jump in. Mark Holloway didn't buy his new home for the neighborhood. He bought it for the silence. Something he felt he'd lost after years of grinding through 12-hour work shifts, barely seeing his family. So when he finally pulled into the quiet cul-de-sac on Oak Ridge Lane, he breathed deeper than he had in months. His daughter, Lily, ran to the driveway, hands full of sidewalk chalk. His wife, Melissa, stretched for the first time that day. For a moment, everything felt right. Mark didn't know that the woman watching from the porch across the street was already preparing her first violation letter. Her name was Gail Anders, and she was the type of HOA president who believed rules weren't guidelines. They were weapons. The sun had barely set on their first day when she marched across the street, heels clicking like a countdown to trouble. Lily was drawing flowers on the sidewalk, bright blues and pinks. Gail stopped in front of her, hands clasped behind her back. Sidewalk chalk, she said sharply, is considered defacement in this neighborhood. Mark froze. It's chalk, he said. It washes off. Gail cut him off. This is a warning. I don't issue second ones. She left a yellow slip on his mailbox and walked away. Mark stared at the paper, pulse rising. Violation number 1, unapproved exterior decoration. A $75 fine. His daughter's artwork. A fine? Melissa whispered. This is crazy. But Mark tried to brush it off. He wanted peace, not a war. He didn't know peace had already been outlawed by the HOA. A week later, Melissa planted a small herb garden in the front yard. Nothing huge. Just basil, mint, rosemary. But to Gail, it was an act of rebellion. She appeared again, this time snapping photos. Unapproved vegetation, she said smugly. HOA rules strictly prohibit front yard agriculture. It's just herbs, Melissa said softly. Gail smiled like she'd won something. I'll add another violation. Maybe now you'll take the rulebook seriously. Another $150 fine. Mark clenched his jaw. But he stayed calm. For now. Everything changed the day 3 packages were stolen from their porch. Mark installed 2 small security cameras, nothing fancy, nothing flashy. But Gail showed up at their door holding a white envelope like it was a court summons. Her lips were tight. Her voice was cold. These cameras violate HOA privacy standards, she announced. Mark frowned. I read the rulebook. Cameras are allowed as long as they don't point into other homes. Gail stepped closer, lowering her voice. You're creating a hostile environment for the community. If you don't remove them within 48 hours. Her eyes narrowed. Legal action will be taken. Mark felt the blood drain from his face. She didn't threaten fines this time. She threatened his family, his home, his security, his peace. And that was her final mistake. That night, Mark sat at the dining table with the HOA rulebook open. Melissa touched his shoulder. She hates us, she whispered. We didn't do anything. Mark flipped through the pages. Rules, regulations, amendments, but something didn't feel right. The formatting was inconsistent. Page numbers skipped. The last amendment date? 2013. 12 years old. His eyebrows lifted. HOAs were required by state law to update governing documents every few years. But this one hadn't. Mark opened his laptop. What he found made his hands tremble. Half the rules Gail cited weren't legally enforceable. Some weren't even in compliance with state HOA statutes. A few were straight up illegal. His heart pounded. Gail wasn't just abusing power. She was breaking the law. Over the next week, Mark became a man on a mission. He walked door to door talking to neighbors. Most were scared. Some whispered. A few looked over their shoulders before speaking. But they all said the same thing. We've been bullied too. One man had been fined $300 for having a flag that was too large. A mother had been threatened for letting her kids play outside too loudly. An elderly couple had been issued violations for their wheelchair ramp, changing the aesthetic value of the community. Mark filled a notebook with everything: dates, names, incidents, photos, copies of notices. He printed out the state laws regarding HOA governance. He highlighted everything Gail had violated. He called the state attorney general's HOA complaint division. By the time he hung up, he knew exactly what he needed to do. The meeting was held in the clubhouse, a dim room smelling of old carpet and cheap coffee. Gail sat at the head table, smug as ever. The room was packed. She cleared her throat. "Our first agenda item." "This won't be necessary," Mark said, standing. The room went still. Gail's eyes widened. "This is not the time for residents to speak." Mark placed a thick folder on the table. Printed emails, state statutes, violation logs, and most importantly, proof that the HOA's governing documents were invalid. Gasps rippled through the room. Mark's voice was steady. "For years, this HOA has enforced illegal rules, issued unlawful fines, abused authority, and intimidated families." He pointed at Gail. "And the president knew, or should have known." The residents murmured angrily. Gail stood up, red-faced. "You have no authority." "Actually," Mark said, "the state attorney's office disagrees." He clicked a Bluetooth speaker. A recorded voicemail played. "This is Investigator Reynolds. We've received your complaint. The documents you sent show significant violations. We are opening a case. An audit will be scheduled." The room erupted. Neighbors cheered. Some cried. One man yelled, "Finally!" Gail stammered, This meeting is adjourned." But she couldn't run. The board voted on the spot. Gail was removed as HOA president. All outstanding fines were voided. An external audit was ordered. And for the first time since moving in, Mark felt safe. His family was safe. And the HOA was finally under control. The room after the HOA meeting felt like a storm had passed through it. People talked in low whispers. Some stared at Gail with a mix of anger and disbelief. Others looked at Mark like they were seeing him for the first time, not as the quiet new guy on the street, but as someone who had just cracked open a door they never believed would budge. Gail, red-faced and shaking, grabbed her purse and stormed out of the clubhouse. But this wasn't over. Not even close. 3 days later, a dark gray sedan pulled into the cul-de-sac. A man in a suit stepped out, tall, clean-cut, clipboard tucked under his arm. Residents peeked through blinds. That's when the neighborhood realized the state had arrived. For the HOA, Investigator Reynolds introduced himself at Mark's door. "Mr. Holloway," he said, voice firm but polite, "thank you for your documentation. The situation is substantial." Mark motioned for him to come in. Reynolds flipped open a folder filled with the HOA's governing documents. Copies Mark had emailed. "These bylaws haven't been updated since 2013, he said. "Many of these rules are non-compliant. Some of the issued fines violate state homeowner protection laws." Mark nodded. He'd suspected as much. But then Reynolds said something Mark didn't expect. "We've received 27 complaints from your neighborhood since you contacted us. It seems your move prompted others to come forward." Mark blinked. 27. He hadn't known it was that bad. Reynolds leaned forward. "I have authorization to conduct a full audit. Today." Mark watched through the window as Reynolds walked across the street to the HOA office, a small room attached to the clubhouse. Within minutes, he was joined by 2 more officials, boxes in hand, collecting files, laptops, flash drives. A few neighbors stepped outside, whispering. Others exchanged hopeful looks, like a weight was lifting off the entire street. Later that day, Reynolds returned to Mark's door holding a folder. "We found something," he said. Inside were handwritten notes, Gail's, and a spreadsheet detailing how much the HOA had collected in fines over the last 5 years. But the numbers didn't add up. Thousands of dollars. Missing. "Some of this money never made it into HOA accounts," Reynolds said. "We'll need to dig deeper." Mark felt his jaw tighten. He'd expected corruption, but not theft. Reynolds thanked him again and left. Within hours, rumors spread across the neighborhood. Some said Gail was pocketing fines. Others said she manipulated violation reports. A few had suspected it for years but were too afraid to speak up. Now, they weren't afraid anymore. A mandatory emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for Friday night. This time, the clubhouse was packed wall to wall. People stood outside listening through the open windows. Gail wasn't there. Instead, the vice president, Tom, a nervous man with thinning hair, took the chair. He cleared his throat. Based on the findings from the state attorney general's office, he said shakily, the board has voted to suspend Gail Anders indefinitely pending investigation. Murmurs rippled through the room. Tom continued. Furthermore, it appears several fines issued over the past 5 years were invalid. All residents will receive refunds. The room erupted with cheers. One neighbor put her face in her hands and cried. Tom raised a hand to quiet the room. There's more, he said. People leaned in. Gail used HOA funds for personal purchases. Gasped. The atmosphere shifted into stunned silence. She may be facing criminal charges, Tom said quietly. Mark felt no joy in the moment. Just justice. Real justice. Tom scanned the room. We will hold elections for a new board in 2 weeks. Until then, we will operate under state supervision. Someone called out, "Nominate Mark." Laughter broke the tension. But then others joined in. Yeah, Mark should be president. He saved all of us. He's the only one who stood up. Mark raised both hands. No, guys, I'm not trying to run anything. I just wanted my family safe. A neighbor shouted, and you made all of us safe. But the night wasn't done. As Mark walked home, still absorbing the whirlwind of change, Gail appeared from behind her bushes. Her hair was messy, her eyes wild, her voice shaky but sharp. You think you're a hero? She hissed. Mark didn't flinch. You threatened my wife, my kids. You broke the law. I protected this community, she snapped. Mark stepped closer, calm but firm. By bullying it, by stealing from it. Gail's breathing grew heavy. You ruined everything. No, Mark said. You did that to yourself. She ran back into her home, slamming the door. It was the last time Mark ever saw her on the street. 2 weeks later, elections were held. Mark didn't run, but he attended. The entire board was replaced with residents who truly cared about the neighborhood. People who believed rules should help, not harm. The first order of business? Updating the bylaws legally. The second? Creating a rule that protected families from harassment. The third? A unanimous vote banning any board member from acting without transparency. Mark watched from the back of the room, arms crossed, satisfied. For the first time since moving in, the neighborhood finally felt like home. One evening months later, Mark sat on his porch, grilling burgers while Lily drew chalk flowers on the sidewalk. A neighbor walked by smiling. Nice artwork, she said. Tell your daughter she's making the street brighter. Mark grinned. I will. Melissa came out, wiping her hands on a towel. Feels peaceful now, she said. Mark nodded slowly. It does. Then he looked across the street, where Gail's house was now listed for sale. He took a deep breath of the warm summer air. For the first time, there was no tension, no fear, no threats, just a man, his family, and a neighborhood finally free.